Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Listen, when will the coronavirus, or what they call COVID-19, end? And, if anybody out there tells you they know exactly when this thing's going to end, they're lying to you. But what we're going to do on this show is we're going to look at a few of the facts about this virus and try to gain an idea, of when it might start to taper off and disappear, and draw a conclusion using the same principles detectives use. Like Sherlock Holmes. How did he figure things out? Use a few clues. And so it's not a determination about when it's going to end. It's more trying to figure out where we are in the scheme of things, and how much longer a time do we have to really be really concerned about it. Of course, we're going to have to be really concerned about this virus until it's completely gone. And there's troubling news coming from China about uh, this virus is able to attack. Now, these papers, what I'm going to talk about right now, have not been peer reviewed. But there's a paper out of China that talks about how the virus has a similar action to AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. In the way in the respective way it can attack the body's cells, and the way it can move into a body's immune system. But I'm not going to go too much into detail about that, but sufficient to say that in one respect, this virus is not like AIDS at all, in the fact that AIDS has a very long incubation period, up to 4 years, and AIDS, acquired immune, generally can, it's not very catchy. I mean, it's mostly a sexually transmitted disease. But you can get it from needles and stuff. But this disease is totally different than AIDS. This disease is highly contagious. Contagious almost to the extreme. Now, I've seen several diagrams that have been drawn of restaurants and also places where a choir was singing, and one person had the virus, and it showed where the others were seating, diagrams of where the others were seated around the person that had the virus, and who all caught the virus, and by looking at these diagrams, it starts to give you an idea of just exactly how contagious this thing is. It's extremely contagious. Now, outdoors, if somebody's outdoors and they have the virus, you're much less likely to catch it on the open wind than you are in an enclosed space. You're much more likely to catch this virus in an enclosed space. We also know that this virus has asymptomatic transmission. But in the asymptomatic carriers of the virus, they don't have as heavy a viral load as the people who are symptomatic with the virus. They have a heavier virus load. And this is important in one big respect. Why this is important is, with an awful lot of viruses, not just COVID-19, but an awful lot of other viruses like influenza A, for instance. They've done studies on mice, and the initial virus load, the virus has to have a starting point in its incubation period inside your body, and so that's the initial virus load. That's called the inoculum, the initial load you take in. Whether you take it in through a tiny droplet that's in the air from somebody that sneezed, goes down, you breathe it in, it goes down into your lungs, and it starts to multiply or replicate. Then the incubation period begins while the virus is replicating inside your system. That initial loading of the virus is called the inoculum. They've done tests on mice with influenza A, and they gave them a very small inoculum. And the mice came down with the virus, but they survived. They gave them a little bit larger inoculum, and the mice died. Okay, and there's a reason for this. Let's just take it to a very small level, and you'll understand what the reason is. Your immune system has to build up a response to the virus. This is how you get over the virus. It creates antibodies. But the immune system takes time to process, to understand what the virus is in order to create antibodies. Now, the virus is replicating inside your system, and this is the reason why your immune system starts working and processing this information in order to create the antibodies. But this takes time, this process. If you get a very, very small inoculum, the virus is replicating. Now, let's say your inoculum you got was one virus, just one virus. Well, in its first doubling, which would take a matter of probably hours, it would double to 2 viruses. And then the second doubling, which would take hours more, it would be 4, and then 8, and then 16, 32, 64, and you get the idea, right? But a lot of time has passed. The virus is inside your body. It's replicating from a starting point of just one virus. Now, I'm just using this as an example. But there's a long time that passes by the time that virus is replicated up into some seriously large numbers. During that period in time, your immune system is working on it. We're working on it, guys. The immune system says, we're working on it. We're building these antibodies, but give us a couple more days and we'll have your antibodies ready for you. Right? So they say, okay, you got a couple more days because the virus is going to take 2 or 3 more days before it's up in high enough numbers where it could make this person sick. Because you got a small inoculum. And so that's what happens. The virus starts replicating, the immune system starts working on it, and by the time the virus gets into large numbers where it's going to make the person sick, well, you have a high inoculum. Because you got a low inoculum, then the immune system has the antibodies ready. It starts to actually fight the virus, and you don't get real sick. You might get a little bit sick, okay? Because you got a small inoculum. But if you get a large inoculum, what happens? Now, instead of getting one virus inside you to start you off, say you got 100 million of them. So instead of replicating from one virus to 2 viruses, you're starting from 100 million, you're replicating to 200 million. So it's going to be a much shorter period of time your immune system has to work on this thing. So instead of having, like, maybe if you got one virus in you, it might take like 8 days for the virus to build up enough numbers where it's mounting the idea for the virus is, let's kill this guy. Let's replicate. Let's shut down his internal organs. Let's kill him. That's what the virus is thinking. But you know what your immune system's thinking? Your immune system's thinking, okay, we're going to make antibodies and we're going to get rid of this invader. But we need some time. So you get 10 million or 100 million of these viruses inside you, you're in big trouble. You're like the rat that got a big dose of influenza A. His immune system didn't have enough chance or enough time to create an antibody or to create any defense. And the virus took over and killed the mouse or the rat. Okay, it's the same thing with you. Works the same way. So if you get a heavy inoculum, you're going to have an awful lot shorter incubation period. And when you do get sick, you're in big trouble. Because your immune system says, hey guys, we still need a couple more days here to mount a defense. You ain't going to get a couple more days because you got a heavy inoculum of the virus and now it's replicated up to a point where it's ready to make you sick now. Not tomorrow or the next day, now. And these are the people who end up on ventilators. Okay? So now the next question you should be asking is, how do I get a low inoculum or a large inoculum? Well, this is very simple. You come in contact with a person that's sneezing and coughing and choking, and he's very sick with this virus, and he's hacking up, and he's sneezing into the air, and you get close to him, you're going to get a heavy inoculum. Right? Or if you're being very careful, you're wearing your face mask, you're wearing gloves or whatever, and you touch a door handle and you accidentally somehow get just a little dab of these viruses on you somehow or another. Wouldn't be hard to do, even though you're being careful. Then you're going to get a low inoculum. Just a few of them got in you. It's going to take them a long time to replicate. And you're probably going to, at a certain point, your immune system might actually be ahead of the virus, might actually mount a response to the virus before the virus can replicate in high enough numbers to really make you sick. So what happens then? Then you become one of these asymptomatic people who doesn't even know they have the virus. But you don't have a heavy virus load inside you. Because you don't have a heavy virus load, because you got a low inoculum, then if you're going to make somebody else sick, it's going to take quite close contact because you're not spreading a lot of the virus around because you got a very low inoculum. In fact, there's a very high probability that if you got tested because you got a low inoculum, because you're an asymptomatic person, if you got tested for the virus, the test might not even conclude that you have the virus. Because it might not be enough of a viral load in your system to trigger the test. And I'm thinking that this is a very strong possibility. That there's a lot of people out there who actually have this virus, have no symptoms, and even if they're tested, the tests will come back negative because they have such a low viral count. But if you catch it off of one of these people, you're going to get a low viral count. Which means you'll get a low inoculum and become like them. Okay? So using this as detective work as a basis for my thesis right now, and knowing how contagious this virus is, knowing that you can catch it from a very small inoculum, probably much smaller than most other viruses, and the reason why is because this particular virus is a new novel virus. And what this basically means is a lot of viruses, you've got to get like an inoculum of at least, say, 50 micrometer size inoculum in order for the virus to actually take, right? Because your immune system will kick it out if you get too small of an inoculum. With this virus, I think you can get an extremely small inoculum and still the virus will take hold. And it'll incubate inside you. And the reason for this is because your immune system doesn't recognize it because it's novel, it's new. It's something that's brand new to the world. Okay? So, what we have here is something that's extremely contagious. And because you can probably catch it from an inoculum that's smaller than 50 micrometers, smaller than a dust particle, it can probably travel on the air for considerable distance. So what we're kind of reaching the conclusion here in my talking to you guys is, you're starting to see what way my mind is going. The way my mind is going that this virus can spread so easily, and it's been around for months now. People in your neighborhoods had it, and everybody's had it. It's very likely that the official numbers on the virus say, well, you go to the site and it says, okay, there's so many thousands of people have it or whatever, Those official numbers only represent the people who have went in, got tested, and had enough virus load in their system so that the test came back positive. And also, they're limited by how many tests that they have and how many tests that they can administer. And the second factor you got to consider is the people are only going to go in and get tested if they're very, very ill. There's a high likelihood, in my mind, this virus is spreading through the population in an asymptomatic fashion. And it has such low viral loads that even if they're tested, the tests will come back negative, even if they really have the virus. Which leads to a conclusion that possibly we are much closer to herd immunity than could ever be realized. Now, I know I'm basing a lot of what I've just said on conjecture on my part, But let's look at things. Let's look at the situation for a minute, have we? You notice how the virus numbers, went up really fast. They were going up, accelerating really fast, and then they kind of reach a plateau, and then the numbers don't increase all that fast. And they say, oh, our social distancing worked. Look, this is why. This is why the numbers went up good, and then all of a sudden the numbers start to drop off, and we're flattening the curve. Our social distancing has worked. What if it's not the social distancing at all? What if the social distancing is not what is slowing down and flattening the curve? What if what's flattening the curve is the fact that everybody has been exposed? Think about something that's this contagious. That if a jogger were to get up in the morning, he were to say, honey, I don't feel real good today. I got a little tickle in the back of my throat. I don't feel that good. And he were to jog by in front of your house, something that's that contagious. He jogs by in front of your house, and you're out there getting the paper about 50 feet away from him, and the breeze blows your way, and that little virus particle goes down inside your nose. Something that's that contagious. Now think about your common everyday activities, like going to the post office and going here and there in a particular day, and how many people you come in contact with. There's a high probability that everybody, or almost everybody now, has been exposed. But why isn't everybody sick? It's because people have been being careful. They've been practicing social distancing, and they've been getting a small inoculum. And when you get a small inoculum, like I explained earlier in my video, it takes a long time for the virus to build up to a point where it's going to make you sick. And during that period in time, do not think for 1 second your immune system isn't working on it. You're going to get really sick with this virus if the virus is able to ambush your immune system. And the only way this virus can ambush your immune system is if you get a heavy virus load at the very beginning, and your immune system doesn't have time to mount a response. So what I think's going on is, I think that we're nearing herd immunity. And this is why I'm not expecting a crushing, like you see in the newspapers. It shows all these pictures of people all going to the beaches this weekend and everything else. And you see them all there. None of them are wearing masks, and they're all associating with everybody. In the next few days, we should see a huge increase in the volume of the virus. It should just flood the hospitals with virus. But I don't think you're going to see that. And the reason why I don't think you're going to see that is probably everybody on that beach has already been exposed. And now, if I'm right about this, by them closing down the world, and by them forcing us to practice social distancing, caused something to happen, if I'm right about this. What it caused to happen was it caused most people to get a low inoculum, to be exposed in a way so that they would get a low inoculum. If they hadn't have done that, if they hadn't have practiced social distancing, if they hadn't have enforced the rules, if they hadn't have had the lockdowns, this virus would have spread in a totally different way. It would have made many people very ill, and those people that come in contact with other people would have in fact got very ill, and it would have just flooded the hospital systems and flooded everybody with people who have caught it from a large inoculum. Because it's my personal belief only, and this is only my opinion, that you catch it in a high inoculum from a person who is extremely contagious and is shedding a lot of the virus. So somebody that's on a ventilator or whatever, or is really sick and got the high fever and everything else, you catch it, you get too close to them, and that's when you're going to get a high inoculum too, and that's when you're going to get extremely ill. But if you catch it off of somebody who has a low inoculum, then you get a low inoculum case. And I think that by what they did, which seems like draconian measures, they inadvertently created a situation where most people became asymptomatic and caught it off of other asymptomatics. And they prevented an absolute tragedy, because 100,000 people in the United States have died from this virus. But I think it could have been like it took China by surprise. You know, we see the city of Wuhan, and people were dropping like flies. And I think this is what happens if you don't really get this virus early and catch it early, and you don't practice social distancing and so on. But I think what's happened now at this point, at this stage in the game, is everybody's pretty much been exposed, I think. And so I think we're much further along in the process of seeing this virus through than anyone could imagine. I think that China, by taking draconian measures and stopping the virus's spread, mostly in Wuhan, they still have, I think, an awful lot of people in China, probably 1 billion people or so, that haven't been exposed. I think almost everybody in the United States now has been exposed. Almost. I think it's probably 70% of the population. Now, this is just my opinion only. I mean, you're just listening to what my opinion is. But I think a very high percentage of the population has been exposed in the United States. But I think in China, where they prevented the virus from spreading, I think their population hasn't been exposed yet. And so I think that they're in a much greater danger position. And what about India? India has limited the exposure of their citizens to the virus too. And so they would be in a much greater danger position now. There was a time when they were flying people over from China and oh no, he's from China and he might have the virus. And people were scared, you know. Now it's the opposite way around. If somebody comes from over here and heads over to China, it's like the Chinese should be frightened, you know. So my personal opinion is I think we're around the halfway point. We might even be more toward the 3/4 way point of seeing this virus through to its end. I think that probably by sometime around this fall, we're going to start to see the numbers drop off drastically. But are things going to get back to normal? I think we're in for a winter of devastation. Because even though the virus is going to start to disappear, start to make its way out, the economy has taken a crushing blow. And I think the full effects of the crushing blow the economy has felt is going to be felt more this winter. Homelessness, people that don't have work. I think it's going to be a nasty winter. But I think we're going to turn the corner by next spring, because I think that the central banks are going to pump out so much money, they're going to print so much money this winter to try to pull us out of this doldrum and try to bring the economy back up, that they're going to make a little bit of a, because money runs everything, and they're going to dump so much money on this, I think, that by next spring that we're going to start to see some green shoots again in the economy. A little bit of a revival. But I also think that that's when we're going to start to see the profoundly high inflation, which is a hidden tax that destroys your wealth. And so I think all of next year is going to be a golden year for gold and for silver, even bigger for silver and for cryptocurrencies. I think 2021 is going to be the year for gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies. And I think it's going to be the year that the virus disappears from the world. I think sometime in 2021, they're going to have a vaccine that works, you know? And the virus will be on the process of disappearing on its own as well. This virus, this year, has made this year into a very bad year indeed. And it's going to go down in human history as being one of the worst years. Next to the year 1929 or 1918 or there's been a number of bad years in human history. The world wars, when we had world wars, I think 1914 or 1915, we had World War I. Well, World War II, we've had some bad years, and I think this is going to be a bad year. This is a bad year. We're in a bad year. We're almost halfway through it. It's going to, 2020, when we look back in history, we're going to say, boy, that was a bad year. 2021 was better, but 2020 was a bad year. Everybody's going to hate 2020 because it was a bad year for everyone in the whole world, and we're suffering through it. Halfway through it right now. I think basically, you want to know my timetable for this virus, and this is my opinion only. I think 2020 is the bad year. I think 2021 is going to be a little bit more relief for us all. It's going to be a little bit better year than this year. I think this is the bad year, and we're halfway through it, guys. We're halfway through the year, almost. Well, we're about halfway through it. Almost halfway through it. And I think we're going to be glad to see the backside of this year. I think that we'll have a very happy New Year's celebration this winter when this year's over and we ring in. It's been such a bad year. Anyway, listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.